more.
I generally speaking haven't loved most Christian media that I've seen, but and I don't know why it was that, but that particular thing of just seeing Jesus walking around with a backpack on, I was like, I'm in. I like it. Well, Dallas Jenkins, welcome to Hey, It's Luskos.
I am so glad to be with you. I'm so glad to be connected with you. Like I said, we have a ton of mutual friends. We've been connected off and on over the last few years, but haven't had a chance to really actually sit down and chat. So this is nice.
This is so nice.
I'm so glad I posted that Instagram story of my family dancing to The Chosen, which happens every time that song comes on. What is the story on that song?
We can't not dance to it.
Yeah,
it's
your
so
body
good.
it takes control of your body. Even if you can't dance, you almost are forced to.
Yeah, we've actually seen people from all over the world actually post similar videos of their 2-year-old dancing to the opening credits, or people talking about how they it's the one show where they don't fast forward through the opening credits because they love the song so much. That's actually a really important song, and the reason is because Dan Hasseltine, who's the lead singer songwriter for Jars of Clay, he and I have been friends for a couple decades. And he's a genius. And he was one of the first people that I talked to about the show, where I said, I don't know that I can do the show without you, because the music of this show, especially the opening credits, especially the whole, just kind of the way we introduce the show, has to be an announcement. It has to say to the audience right off the bat, this is not your typical Bible show, your typical Bible project. Visually, we're not going to play by all the normal rules. Content-wise, we're not going to play by the normal rules. And so the music is one of the first things to cue you into that. And the opening credits needs to be an announcement. Like, hey, this is what this show is. This is what the tone of this show is going to be. It's going to be a little bit different. And so that opening song says essentially, you know, we're putting you into a world like, and the style of the music is kind of Southern gospel meets slave spiritual, with a little bit of Middle Eastern flair thrown in. And the singer, whose name is Ruby Amanfu, she's a Grammy Award-winning singer from, she lives in Nashville, but she's originally from, I believe, Jamaica. I could be getting that wrong, so forgive me if that's wrong. But it's just a really important, like even the lyrics of the song are important, because it says, you know, walk on the water, you know, join me in the water. I got no trouble with the mess you've been. It's very much just everything about that song says what the show is.
Yes.
And we wanted to do that right off the bat. So I know that's a long, kind of a long explanation of just a simple.
No, it's good. And that's a fun place to begin, because that is the beginning of every episode. And that's what reconnected us. We'd obviously, as you referenced, had met a while back in a previous lifetime for you. But then when I posted that video, some people from your team had kind of reached out and wanted to try and reconnect us. And like I said, I'm just so glad that God uses little things like that, because we have become big fans. But I did want to say that the way it's been incremental has been fun. And just last night we were watching an episode, and we're trying to make it through season 2. At the time we're recording this, there's still 2 more episodes to go for us. But my daughter Daisy turned to me during the most recent opening credits we were watching and goes, "Dad, that one fish is telling the other fish to go with it." And so it's funny to watch little things the more you kind of watch it little. And then my 15-year-old, who just graduated from her freshman year of high school, or moved on to her sophomore year of high school, she has not watched it with us much. She has a job, she's got life. And so the times we've watched it, she's kind of caught it here and there. But just the other day she watched an episode and she goes, "Hey, I'll watch this more. Let me know when you guys are going to watch these, because I'll watch this with you." And then she lied down on the couch, and then she was watching the scene, one of the amazing mini moments when the disciples are walking with Jesus, and it's just this moment of like, it's the music
after the Samaritan woman, after that moment.
The season finale.
Yes.
And then they're just
Jesus
walking down the road.
Yeah, his crew are just walking.
And she just looked at us, and you would have loved it. She's 15 years old, which, as you know, it's hard to impress teenagers. And she looked up and she was like, that's pretty tough. I got to admit. And she just
Yeah.
it got her.
Well, and I'm actually wearing, this is a total coincidence, but I happen to be wearing one of our shirts, which says Trouble on it.
Yes.
And it's the lineup of that moment at the season finale when they're walking off towards Samaria and that song kicks in, which is a similar vibe to the opening credits song. And it's meant to be, again, an announcement. It's meant to be, and we've had a few people, it's a minority, but a few people have been like, I'm not totally comfortable with that last song. Jesus needs to be more reverent. Needs to be treated more reverently. I like the show, but that song didn't fit the tone of the show. And I'm going, well, we're establishing the tone of the show.
Exactly.
With the music. So that's the whole tone of the first season. And it's been so cool. When you tell me about your 15-year-old or any of your kids, that's probably been the number one thing that wrecks me the most about the show is I didn't expect young kids to like it. We've heard from like parents of 6 and 8 and 9-year-olds. But I was hoping teens would like it too, because when I was a teenager, I had nothing in the Christian world. If you want to consider this show to be in the Christian world, I had nothing that related to my faith, or certainly not a Jesus project, where I could watch it and go, A, this is just as enjoyable for me as any other shows that I watch.
Yeah.
And B, it shows a Jesus that I really want to follow, not a boring, emotionally distant, formal Jesus who speaks in King James English. And so these songs, these music, these shots, to me are like the greatest story ever told deserves this kind of a treatment.
Well, and I don't know why it hits me so hard, but it stuck out to me that Jesus wore a backpack. And I don't know, I just have never considered Jesus putting a backpack on. And for some reason for me, that was the moment when I decided I'm pretty skeptical. I wouldn't say I'm like jaded, but I generally speaking haven't loved most Christian media that I've seen. But and I don't know why it was that, but that particular thing of just seeing Jesus walking around with a backpack on, I was like, I'm in, I like it.
Well, here's the reason I think that connects. And it's one of the reasons why I'm hoping that we can do more things together with The Chosen, with your ministry and whatnot, is because the 4 core essences of The Chosen, and we discussed this as a team a few months ago. We were like, all right, what is our brand, for lack of a better term? I know that's a crass marketing term, but I think it's important to recognize.
Yeah,
sure.
Definitely.
And from the content, from our communication style to my relationship with the viewer as the creator of the show, what are our 4 core essences? And they are authentic, intimate, playful, disruptive. And I think that describes a lot of your ministry as well. I think the two of you have connected with people in a unique way because you are, I think, authentic with a capital A. I mean, it exudes from you in everything that you do, you say, you write. And I think that the show, something as simple as a backpack, or as simple as Jesus winking at somebody in episode 2 when they made fun of his hometown, those moments, believe it or not, have gotten as much response as some of the big miracle moments, where they're like, I've never thought of Jesus dancing with his friends at a wedding and teasing his disciple, friend.
That can't dance.
Yeah, exactly. And Simon says to him, "Can you help Andrew be a better dancer?" And Jesus says, "Some things even I cannot do."
I know. So good.
Yeah,
like stressing the humanity of Jesus for some people is scary, and some people who watch the show, who have seen the show, have been occasionally bothered by some of the human side of Jesus, human sides of Jesus that we've portrayed. But the most part, like 99% of the viewers, and I think this is the biggest reason the show has resonated, is that stressing the human side of Jesus has actually enhanced our adoration and appreciation of his deity.
Yes.
Saying, oh my goodness, the creator of the universe, who in our show does miracles, asserts himself as the Son of God, asserts himself as the Messiah, asserts himself as the creator of the universe, also had to dress a wound, also had to stretch out sore muscles. One of the most controversial things we've done, which you probably haven't seen yet, which you might appreciate as a pastor, I hope, is him doing sermon prep. He does sermon prep in episode 5 of season 2.
Wow.
And that, for about 10% of the audience, they completely were horrified by that because they just couldn't accept that that God ever needed to rehearse anything.
Wow.
But for most people, and for me, I believe that those things actually make me go, wow, that guy, the creator of the universe dwelt among us, Emmanuel, God with us. He did his first big miracle as a favor for his friends because his mom asked him to. He begged God to change his mind about the crucifixion when he was in the Garden of Gethsemane. When he was on the cross, he wondered if God had forsaken him. And he quoted Psalm 22. And in our portrayal, he, had a wound he had to dress and he had to stretch his sore muscles. And those things for me, and he wore a backpack, like you said, those things for me make me personally, at least, more appreciative and more in awe of the sacrifice that he made on the cross.
I wonder how many requests you've had for people to purchase that backpack and whether you've considered selling them, because it's a pretty cool backpack.
It is
also.
really cool.
Just as someone who appreciates leather.
Oh, well, and the couple that made that backpack, it was hand stitched. They're out of Texas. They're this poor old couple that, they're not that old, but they're just poor. And they were big fans of the show. And they did the leather stuff for us for the show, like some of our, like the sheaths for the knives. And then this backpack, which was hand stitched and crafted from an actual like Texas cow that they did themselves. And people were freaking out about, they loved it so much. Well, when we got to the time for them to give us the invoice for all of their work, at the bottom, it said $0. And they said, these are our loaves and fish.
Oh, geez.
We couldn't contribute financially. And I was wrecked.
Yeah.
I mean, I was just completely wrecked. And because so then I said to them, well, we're getting so many people who love this backpack and who would like, what if we like, could you hand stitch maybe 50 of them, and then we could sell them for a large amount of money. Because they're worth, it probably cost them several $100s just to do it.
Yeah.
And I said, this could be a way to, generate income for the show. And he ended up handcrafting, I think it was 30 of them. And when he was done, it took him like half a year, When he was done, we said, you know what? We're not going to sell these. We're going to give these away to people, whether it's on the crew or fans of the show who do something truly sacrificial, truly that befits the spirit of what they did. And so we got a contribution from I called up one of our wealthier fans of the show. And I said, would you mind contributing to this guy? So we paid him plenty so that for his time. But yeah, there's 30 of those in existence. We've given away 12 of them.
Wow.
No, I'm not going to give you one.
I wasn't going to ask.
Yeah. It was that backpack. It's so funny that you bring it up because I've never talked about this before.
Can you say the guy's company so people could Google it and hit them up independently and try and buy stuff from them and support their business?
We did that last year. We put out a video kind of talking about the backpack and all that. And eventually he's going to, we're working on it about doing something like that and maybe doing the backpacks in a smaller scale, a little bit less expensive, something that's more mass producible. But yeah, it's just funny you bring that up because it's like that backpack represents for me, Jesus's humanity, Jesus's kind of work, kind of hardworking work ethic, kind of that philosophy. That he's like a guy who walked around on this earth and had a backpack.
Well, that and him brushing his teeth. I think now that even you're kind of going on, is other things are kicking in, and I think it's just little things you take for granted. He was there for 30 years before his ministry began, but you don't really oftentimes remember that's 30 years of little mundane details, like putting on a backpack, like brushing his teeth, and it just that's the quirky, weird, beautiful little moments, in my opinion. That of course the epic stuff is game changing too, but those little things sometimes can be more disruptive, to use your word.
Yeah. Yeah, that's totally true. But that backpack for me represents not only those things, but also the spirit of the show, the whole notion that like this show was started. It was launched from a short film I did for my church.
Okay. Yes. So that was the pilot though, right?
Yeah. So I did a short film for Christmas, for my church's Christmas Eve service.
And that was The Shepherd, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that was the Christmas short film that was coming off of my biggest career failure. I didn't even know if I had a future as a filmmaker anymore. I had to surrender all of it to God and say, okay, I'm genuinely okay with never making another movie as long as I'm in your will. And, the whole concept of the feeding of the 5,000, I got this word from someone who just said, your job is not to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish. And that concept changed my life. And so I was willing to just say, look, the results aren't up to me. Even the ministry impact isn't up to me. All that I can control and all that I want to do is make sure that the 5 loaves and 2 fish that I provide to God are deemed worthy of acceptance to him. And what he does with it after that point is not my business. Wow. And so that's what allowed me to be open to a short film that I filmed on my friend's farm, 20 minutes from my house here in Illinois.
Oh my God.
For my church's Christmas Eve service, just as this feels like a small loaf and a small fish, but it feels like a big step down from a Hollywood movie. But, I just want to be doing what God is calling me to do. And I feel, compelled to do this short film. And that short film is ultimately what was the catalyst to generate the $10 million in crowdfunding that shattered the all-time crowdfunding record in the first season and has launched this whole show. Well, that whole spirit of it. The backpack represents that spirit.
Yeah, right. The tenacity.
We're all just contributing our loaves and fish. And this is way bigger and better than I am. And from day one, it's been kind of this loaves and fish project that I'm just fortunate to be part of.
It's so beautiful, Dallas. Thank you for sharing that. I was first introduced to you by my friend Laura, who was like, "You've never heard of The Chosen? Oh my gosh!" And then I still didn't watch anything. She was like, "You need to," and I still didn't. And then I was preaching a message at our church before Christmas called "Do You Hear What I Hear?" And it was all about the shepherds that night. And my friend was like, "Okay, you need to watch this. Just watch this one." Yeah. And so I watched it and was just wrecked. I watched it probably like 5 times.
No, and then she made everyone on our staff watch it, and she was like, "And you have to email when it's watched." Like she was that, and then she finally like forced me to sit down and like put it on the same thing.
And I mean, I'm brimming with just gratitude and thankfulness to you for your creativity, for who you are, for how you lead. Just, I am so grateful. I feel like my relationship with Jesus has been so deepened by how you portray Jesus. When I'm having my quiet time, and maybe this is weird, but sometimes I'm just picturing like having a conversation with him and the guy who plays Jesus, which I don't remember his name, like it always comes to my mind. And I'm a very just visual learner, and I love pictures, and I just like, and so you've just given me personally, but I know countless people, just that visual of Jesus's kind eyes. And so I'm just so grateful, and my life has been changed by what the art and the creation that you have put out into the world. And so I'm just so grateful.
Oh, that means everything. Yeah. His name is Jonathan Rumi. Oh, yeah. And he, his eyes, they talk about the Jesus eyes all the time now from this show. And Jonathan will be the first to tell you he's not Jesus. He is not worthy of this. In fact, there was a moment in season 1 when it's in episode 6 where he's at Zebedee's house, and ultimately the paralytic comes through the roof, and that whole miracle sequence. Well, that happens while he's preaching to this crowd that is gathered at the house. And Jonathan was clearly, and I wasn't really picking up on it. I was distracted, and it was a really big scene, and I wasn't listening to him very clearly, but he was struggling, and he was stressed. So finally he grabs me and he says, "I need you to understand how hard this is for me." And I'm like, okay, I'm listening. And he just says, I don't feel worthy of this. I'm struggling. And he starts to get emotional. And I literally chuckled, and I was like, "Oh, brother, like, oh yeah, welcome. Like, we need to embrace that. We need to like rest in that feeling for the rest of this show, that we are not worthy. And that needs to become a operating principle for all of the scenes that we ever do. And it's an operating principle for me when I write the show, is this sense of unworthiness. And I think Jonathan, that's part of what comes through, is he really is getting out of the way. Now, I'm not saying that, I'm not claiming spiritual authority. I'm not claiming this show is God inspired. There is one, word from God that can be declared as God inspired, and that's the Bible. And the show is not the Bible, and Jonathan's not Jesus. Yeah. But I do believe, and I think you're affirming this, that the show for many people has drawn them closer to Scripture and drawn them closer to Jesus.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is the evidence that God is at the very least working through the show.
Yes.
I'm thrilled and humbled to be part of that. And it's beautiful to hear you say that, because I feel like that's what it's done for me too. I'm like, I've loved Jesus my whole life. I was a Bible major in college. I get it. But I feel like there's this from black and white to color now. And I feel like Jesus is someone who I can sit around a fire with and talk to. And I haven't always felt that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting too, how seeing Jesus like even interact with his disciples, even the character, like building up the characters of the disciples, like it's just so, all these things are like, wow, I never thought of that. Or I never would think like the interaction between Philip and Matthew, like that's super special. And obviously you've taken liberty in certain things of what could have been, but it's so creative. But I love, one of the things is that has helped me is even seeing how Jesus like deals with the bickering of the disciples. Like I'm in a phase of life where I'm dealing with a lot of bickering in my home with my kids.
9 and 10-year-old. Yeah.
Yes. And so I feel like I'm gleaning a lot from like just patience, and obviously in my own study in the Bible, but like just how he deals with the disciples is just very helpful and really funny at times. But
did you ever think you'd be making a parenting movie? How God uses something you make is probably just so funny.
Well, it's I think it's absolutely something that has emerged with the show. I mean, in the first 4 episodes in particular, actually first 5 episodes, the relationship between Simon Peter and his wife is a key part of it. And a lot of that came from my own relationship with my wife. I think Simon's wife, Eden, has a lot of inspiration from my wife. And there was someone who reached out who's a prominent marriage author and speaker, and talked about, doing maybe a book series that's kind of rooted in Simon and Eden's relationship from the show. And there's been multiple times where, like for example, in season 2, one of the main characters has a relapse, like is going back to their struggles, or and there was someone on YouTube who made this video criticizing it, saying, well, Jesus would have followed this person and helped them and walked them through it. And it's similar to the scene that I think you're referring to, which is in episode 3 of season 2, where the disciples are having this major bickering session while Jesus has spent the entire day healing people. And he walks past them absolutely exhausted, sweating, bleeding, or not bleeding, but blood on him.
The blood of other people, yeah.
And all he says is good night, and he goes to bed and gets ready for bed and does his nighttime prayers. And
his mom coming in, that's just touching, helping him take his shoes off. Right.
So all of that is, I think, to say Jesus doesn't always, like step in and guide everything. Sometimes he lets us flail a little bit and waits for us to reach for him.
And the negative space allowed them to be convicted on their own even.
Yes. Wow. And sometimes he's like, I'm here, but I'm not gonna force feed you. Like sometimes you need, and I think that is the parenting principle. I mean, I've had many moments in my parenting life where I've watched my kid, flail in something, and I'm like, you're going to have to figure out that you're doing something really stupid right now. Right. Because that's going to stick in your mind much longer. And then eventually when you ask for help, or when you apologize, or when you recognize that you've made a mistake, then I'm there for you to kind of help guide you for the next time and all that. But I think that's the beauty of doing a multi-season show as opposed to a movie, is that you have multiple seasons. This show is going to be 7 seasons long. We have time to dig into all of those things and to go into the depth of those exchanges that Jesus had with his disciples and with his enemies. And I think it gives us the time to kind of apply it to today. I mean, my belief is that if you can see Jesus through the eyes of those who actually met him, you can be changed and impacted in the same way they were. If you can identify with their struggles, identify with their pain, identify with their questions, you can then hopefully identify with their answers and solutions. And so when you think of even just like social media interactions, like I'm hopeful that for me personally, it does this, and for others that the show can kind of provide a little bit of a template. Like, all right, that reminds me of this huge issue I had on social media the other day. I'm going to practice what I what I'm preaching, or I'm going to practice what Jesus did in the show. And that's really ultimately at the end of the day, the point of the show is to connect us to those people 2,000 years ago and recognize that our problems are theirs. And so is the solution.
Yeah, that's insightful, though,
Wow.
that over-parenting is just as much of a mistake as under-parenting, and that really does come through. And I think there's a lot of parallels people can pull from that to leadership, to how you lead a staff, to how you lead a team. It's very good. And I do want to come back a little bit to you mentioned the greatest failure, and you've said that a lot in the videos you make before you show the show, your biggest Hollywood flop, and you were kind of candid in the fact that you related to Nathaniel under the fig tree, and that you were your own inspiration there. I want to talk a little bit about more that failure. Like what didn't go right with that movie? Just it didn't perform like you thought it would. What was that?
Well, yeah, that's what I was doing at 3:00 in the morning on January 20th, 2017, when the movie had flopped at the box office that day. And after months of anticipation from all of these big Hollywood companies that had gotten involved, and the movie had tested great, like better than any of the other movies they'd ever done. And they'd put money into the release, and the plan was to do more movies over the next 10 years with me. I mean, like we were like a movie every 2 years together. And I was set. I had a bright future as a director. And then when the movie bombed at the box office.
This is the resurrection of Gavin Stone?
Yeah, the resurrection of Gavin Stone, yeah. And if you're listening and you haven't heard of it, that's the problem. Yeah.
Was it? You said it tested well though. So was the marketing budget the problem? What do you think the issue was?
Well, I think it's a lot of things. I mean, first and foremost, that's one of the things I was realizing when I was doing this 15-page memo at 3:00 in the morning. I was trying to analyze everything that had gone wrong. And I think the first thing you do is most people I'd seen in the business don't do this, and I didn't want to be that. I wanted to look inward, and I go, okay, clearly I just didn't make a movie that people wanted to see on a measurable level, and that's on me. And then I think also the movie. I'm proud of the movie, and the movie's actually doing really well on Netflix right now, and it's starting to have a little bit of a resurgence. I like the movie, but it's not a theatrical movie. I think it's a movie it's kind of like I consider it a really good Hallmark movie. And I think it belonged on Netflix probably to begin with, but we tried to turn it into a theatrical release. I just don't think it was good enough for that, or at least cinematic enough. I mean, it was a pretty low budget, but the really key thing that happened, and I think this is a good principle in any business or in any even ministry, is they did a test screening for strangers, and the movie tested through the roof. I mean, people were laughing and crying. I mean, it was one of the most successful test screenings that any of these companies had, and they're big Hollywood companies. But one of the things that in the surveys, these anonymous surveys that they wrote, it got a 95%. So what they'll ask is they'll say, it's funny, I've never actually talked about this before, so it's a good question. But the survey says, one of the questions is, did this movie exceed your expectations? Did it meet your expectations? Did it fall below your expectations? And it scored a 95% on exceeded expectations. And everyone was really excited about that. And at the time I went, it's a little bit of a scary number when you think about it, because what that means is they came in with moderate to low expectations, which means that they probably wouldn't have seen this movie if they had to pay for it. This was a free screening, and that's how test screenings go, is people go out. If you've ever been to LA, you may have been approached before by someone with a clipboard, and they go, do you want to see a free movie? And they ask you some questions, and then they invite you to this, private test screening, and it's free, which is cool. And it's how you get people to come. But when the movie scores that high on exceeded expectations, I just went, yeah, clearly we need to make sure that people know in advance that this is a movie worth seeing. And the only way to do that is to screen the heck out of it. We need people to see it and spread the word. And that didn't happen. And I think that hurt it, because people who've seen the movie, for the most part, at worst, liked it or found it watchable or enjoyable or a good laugh. Not everyone, of course, thought it was great, but for the most part, even people who were skeptical and even people who don't like Christian movies were like, this was really watchable. It was really funny. I laughed. It had a good, it was meaningful. The acting was great. It's not a award winner. It's not a theatrical movie, but I enjoyed it. But I think when it came out, there were many people who just were like, I'll wait till it's out on video, or it looks okay, doesn't look great. And you guys said it both. We when you said even with The Chosen, which I think is much different than Gavin Stone and has had much, much higher word of mouth and people excited about it. But even you, when your friends were saying, you need to watch this, we described that exchange as kind of the Philip and Nathaniel exchange from episode 2 and from the Gospels. Philip goes to Nathaniel and says, you've got to meet this. I've met the Messiah, and he mentions he's from Nazareth. And Nathaniel's response is, can anything good come from Nazareth? And Philip's response is,
he goes way off on it harder. He's like the dirt roads, and they live in the same caves with their animals.
Yeah. Well, that's in the show. Yes. In the
you're talking
gospel,
about in the actual Bible. Yeah.
Yeah. In the actual Gospels, God's word, Levi. But in the Bible, all he says is, because anything good come from Nazareth. And yes, in the show, I expand on all that because we talk about why was it that people were so down on Nazareth, which isn't really explained in the Gospels. So we explain how Nazareth was really a podunk town,
It's a one Walmart town.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, yeah, and like not even a full Walmart. Like it's like a
mini Walmart.
It's like only the grocery section.
Just a Walgreens.
Yes, exactly. So. And Philip just says, come and see. That's all he says. Well, we've extrapolated that a little bit because that exchange has happened so many times. I'm sure you were thinking, can anything good come out of Christian media? Like there was just this, I think there's for so many people an inherent, like, I've got so many great shows to watch on Netflix. I've got so many great shows to watch on, so many great shows to watch on, basic cable or HBO or whatever it is.
Disney Plus, Hulu. There's more than ever.
I'm not watching it. Yeah. I'm not watching a Jesus show. And then I heard it was crowdfunded and it's from a director I've never even heard of. Like you guys knew we'd met before, but like there was no indication.
Funny though, I didn't know your name. So I didn't have the context to know. I would have given it a shot knowing you. It was not like that for me. It was, I don't
We were watching the season finale together when you were building the.
Oh yeah. No. I'm saying I had heard something, The Chosen. It's just, you're just so busy. You don't really have a, you know what I mean? You're doing your thing. And I'm more like, did the new episode of Yellowstone come out? So it's like to be completely candid and, I've got books to read. I got sermons to write. So it was just one more thing. It feels like a burden to get excited about anything new at sometimes. So it wasn't like as much of a jading, although you're sure right. There can be a sense in which, Fireproof, and the new thing that every Christian is super excited about, Thomas Kincaid paintings 10.0, and now it's the Prayer of Jabez, which, all those things are, I'm not trying to, throw shade on that, but.
Yeah, I think if you were on Facebook or Instagram and someone was talking about, Tiger King or something from Netflix that is like, you have to stop what you're doing and watch this right now.
Now, I did stop the clock for Tiger King, but that's just a result of the pandemic. Jennie thought I lost my salvation.
My mind is too pure.
Yeah. Oh man, no, the Tiger King is one of the greatest pieces of media in the history of the universe. But you just proved my point, which is like, there are some things that when you hear about them, you have no reason to assume that they're not going to be great because everyone that you normally trust, pop culture is saying this is a must watch. But when you hear a Jesus show is a must watch, there's going to be that, it's not on Netflix. I'm not hearing it necessarily from the people I trust the most. Now, by the time, you were hearing it from your wife. So I think eventually you found the time, but it just it took a long time for this show to reach critical mass or where it's reaching now. And I think the number one biggest thing, besides maybe the fact that it's on its own app, it's not on Netflix and whatnot, was people just were like, I just can't get excited about it. It feels like medicine. I'll get to it when I can because I'm a Christian, so I'll watch it as because it's a Christian thing.
And so Gavin Stone didn't have that factor. And it's an interesting thing that you could go into a screening and have a problem be too many positive or, as you said, exceeded expectations reviews. That's really interesting and insightful.
Wow.
Yeah, it was that number. I remember that night I said, this is a good and bad number. Let's pay attention to it. And we didn't. It's the one thing that I think that I say, if people say, what was the problem? I blame myself. They're like, yeah, but what else? The one thing that I wish the distribution team and marketing team would have done is paid more attention to that number and recognize this is a movie that needs to be seen as many times as possible so that people have time to give it word of mouth. So that when it comes out in theaters, people are excited about it. But if that movie would have been successful, you and I would not be talking right now, because The Chosen wouldn't exist. I would be, I would have done some other movies, and The Chosen was birthed from failure, and that was the only way it could have been birthed. And I think when I got to this point where I was strung out on my floor, broken and surrendered, because that day, and I think you've heard this story before, but that day is when my wife and I were home alone. I'm sure you guys have experienced this, and I know you've experienced it to a much even more painful degree than I have. Is when you experience loss. For you, it was family. For me, it was my career, which is nothing compared to what you went through. But that moment of what is the future? What can be like? Where is God in this? Where is and for me, God laid it on my wife's heart so powerfully and clearly, the story of the feeding of the 5,000. And we read that story and saw the thing that God kind of pressed on our hearts reading that story was that when Jesus was made aware that the people were starving and needed food, not only was he not surprised by it, he had caused it. It was his fault. He was absolutely in the need, in the desperation. He's the one who'd been talking for 3 days. None of it was a surprise to him. And so depending on your theology of causing or allowing, at least when it comes to my situation, I believe that God absolutely was involved in allowing what had taken place and got me to that place of desperation. Wow. And so that when I was at that place and the only thing left for me was a miracle to save my career, if anything was going to save it, similar to the only thing left to bring food to these people was a miracle, because Jesus said in that story, if I send them home to get food, they're going to faint along the way. That's how that's how hungry they were. So he knew it. And he was in that position. He allowed them to get in that position so that the only thing left was the one thing he could do that no one else could do. So we were comforted by that, but we thought, the reason God pointed us to this story is to recognize that there's a miracle coming. We don't know what it is, but there's a miracle coming. So maybe the box office numbers are going to magically turn around, and that never happened. So that night at 3 a.m, when I get a Facebook message out of the blue that doesn't even say hello, just says, remember, your job is not to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish. And I'm in the middle of a 15-page memo analyzing everything I've done wrong. And I'm going, did my wife and I tell anybody what we were talking about all day and the scripture that God pointed us to? Like, how did he know this? So I go, what are you doing up at 3 a.m? And he goes, well, I'm in Romania. I'm on a different time zone. And I'd never even met this guy. We just were Facebook friends. And he said that as he was walking home, so I said to him then, well, why did you tell me that? He goes, that wasn't me. God just told me to tell you that. And as he tells it now, he was walking home from the grocery store and he looked on his computer or on his phone to see, because he had liked the movie Resurrection of Gavin Stone. So he was looking at the numbers and he saw that they were bad. And he was like, oh man, that sucks. And then he hears, not hears, but God lays it on his heart, tell Dallas it's not his job to feed the 5,000. It's only to provide the loaves and fish.
Oh my gosh.
And I get emotional even remembering it, even though I've told this story 300 times, but because he listened to God, and he said to God, I barely even know him. Are you serious? And I was like, just tell Dallas that. So he sends me that Facebook message and gets a response 10 seconds later. And
how'd you know that? You have my house bugged?
Exactly. I mean, I honestly wondered if my computer had been recording what we had been talking about.
Alexa. It's Alexa's fault, Dallas.
Exactly. No, and Bill Gates and all that. Yeah. And so my life changed in that moment. Wow. My life drastically changed, and I'm like, okay, I'm perfectly content to solely be responsible for the 5 loaves and 2 fish that I provide. And everything after that is up to God. And that's why the failure of the Resurrection of Gavin Stone changed my life and got me to that place of, okay. Yeah. I surrender. I'm willing to be yours, even in the midst of this failure, in the midst of this devastation. And I'm willing to not do anything else that I want to do. I'm willing to give that up to you. And that's when God, I believe, was like, now you're ready for the chosen. And now you're ready to tell Jesus stories. And now you're ready to do a show that for tens of millions of people is going to be their kind of picture of who my followers are and who even Jesus was, and it's going to draw them to Scripture. And I need a broken vessel for that, because you're not going to be able to do that if you have any sense of pride, any sense of control, any sense of responsibility or worthiness or ownership. I need a shattered, vessel for a project like this. And God help me if I ever retreat to who I was before that, because I think it's the only reason the show has resonated.
Wow.
Jeez.
Thank you for sharing that, Dallas. So vulnerable.
I mean, you think about, you said a lot of things there that are worthy. I hope people are grabbing hold of birth from failure. You said shattered, broken vessel, the whole idea of God creating anointing oil out of pressing and crushing olives. And,
it was the three crushings, which is in the Garden of Gethsemane. Jesus 3 times, was crushed and went to his disciples like, why are you sleeping? And it was on the third crushing that when Jesus was truly shattered, it was in a garden of olive trees.
And more oil comes out of the pits than the meat, and it takes a big rock. And you experience that. That's fun to say, but not fun to live. Yeah. And we felt it. But the greatest power comes out of the most difficult pain. And so, I just sense people getting encouraged listening to this to believe that the failure of whatever they think is their greatest failure could be the greatest. The phoenix rising from the ashes. This is our faith. This is what our faith was born out of. And we are resurrection people. I love that Pope John Paul quote, "We are the Easter people, and hallelujah is our song." Yeah. And, that's your life. You've lived that out. But 3 a.m, it doesn't feel so good when you think you might lose your house. It's a different thing to live that out.
Yeah. And no one knows that, or few people know that better than you two. And so, but I think for a lot of people, it's important to recognize that this story that I've told and my experience of learning what joy versus happiness means, that joy is eternal, but happiness, of course, can be based on whether your favorite team wins the game or not. And I'm like, I've never been more disappointed in my career, but yet I've never felt more joy in my life than where I'm at in this moment. And I was sharing this story and sharing these principles when I was making The Shepherd, and I was speaking at a film conference, where I was being asked to be the keynote speaker and give all these great bits of wisdom on filmmaking. And I'm telling 750 people, I got nothing for you on how to be a successful filmmaker, because I'm not. I actually am just coming off of my biggest failure. I'll tell you this, though, it's not your job to feed the 5,000, it's only to provide the loaves and fish. And when you realize that, you'll feel more, when you truly live that out, you'll have more joy than you've ever had. And that's where I'm at right now. I have more joy than I've ever felt. And I have no idea if I'm going to ever make another movie. Right now, I'm doing a short film for my church on my friend's farm. God. And that posture, that feeling of joy existed before The Chosen shattered the all-time crowdfunding record, and now we're in season 2, and now we considered to be quote unquote successful. And I have a certain stability that I didn't have, financially and with health benefits and all that kind of stuff when I didn't have a job. But I think that's so important for anyone listening to understand, is that the rising out of the ashes doesn't always mean, a show that is successful or a book.
Right.
And what you, I'm sure, would be quick to say, and we've found out, is that when you do get your dreams coming true, it comes with its own peculiar level of challenge. And there's difficulties inside success that aren't in failure and that are surprising when you get there.
Oh man. My wife, in the first year of The Chosen, while the show was growing and finding its footing, and we were working really hard, it hadn't been successful yet. God had Amanda, my wife, in the Old Testament, in all of her quiet time, constantly just driving her to the Old Testament. And she was like, I don't know why God has me in the Old Testament so much. And then she started to hit her, and she said, He is giving me major warnings about success.
Wow.
Like the biggest failures in the Old Testament came as a result of success and riches and wealth and fame and attractiveness. And you look at David and Solomon and Moses and all these people, where these great victories were had, and they were given tremendous leadership and ownership. And then it was like, bam, all of a sudden, the success destroyed them. And she's like, we need to like really lean into this, because this show is growing, and there's a chance this may become big, and watch out. Like, let's not get comfortable. Let's make sure we're staying in this state of brokenness. And that's been true. I mean, right now, as I talk to you, I'm in the middle of season 2, where I'm writing season 3. The show is exploding. And
you're 50 languages, right? Is that what I understand?
Yeah, over 50 languages. It's in every country in the world. We're generating, I mean, we're the financing for season 3, we've generated millions and millions of dollars. I mean, the show is, by all accounts, a major success. And just this morning, my wife and I were experiencing major tension and stress, not only with each other, but in our lives, major, like a significant tense. I'm not going to throw her, I'm not going to, tell tales out of school, but I mean, we were having one of those marital moments of stress and tension, because we're moving to Texas in July. And
you said you're moving to Texas in July?
Yeah. And season 3 is on the corner, and I'm not sleeping, because I have to finish season 2 and write season 3. And she's moving, and she just finished the second Bible study that we've got out. Our season 1 Bible study has been a bestseller, and we've got a season 2 Bible study that she just finished, and she's the primary writer of it, while also having 4 kids, 1 of them in college, 3 of them home. I mean, it is madness. Yeah. And so we've had as much or more tension and strife as we did when we didn't know when how we were going to pay for medical bills and all that. I mean, it never goes away. And in many ways, as you see when you read the Old Testament, especially, quote unquote, success is as dangerous and as difficult to navigate through, probably more so.
Yes.
Than failure.
Well, and it's like, I mean, Proverbs 3, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Just that idea of we're learning to trust God, and in every opportunity that we have, whether it's the loss of a job or the loss of a child or whatever, like, it's new opportunities to trust God in a different way. But now it's like, it's a whole new way to trust God, and a whole new way to navigate loving, preferring your spouse in the midst of the craziness, and loving one another. And it's just, you're right. It changes what that tension is, and it's hard to handle, but that's real.
And I use a story in my book, I Declare War, about Alan Shepard, the first American in space, who had everything in the rocket he needed, except they forgot to put a diaper in. And so before the flight, when there was delayed for weather, he had to relieve himself in the suit. And so many people, as the space race captured the entire culture, were like, oh, what must it be like to be him in that rocket right now? He must be just thinking he's a god. And the truth was, he's peeing his pants, and so it's like, from the outside, successful people, you wonder, ooh, Dallas Jenkins, he must be, he thinks he's a big shot. He walks on water now, blah, blah, blah. In the inside, it's like, man, I'm just trying to keep my head on straight, keep walking. Yes. It's like, a lot of people think assume you must be struggling with pride, and it's like, you might actually be struggling just with the confidence to go about your day tomorrow.
Totally.
Because success is a lot different from the inside than it looks from the outside.
That's good.
Oh,
that's really good.
And you've experienced this, I know, because I've read it. I mean, I'm a fan of yours. I'm a fan of both of yours. I've followed your lives to a degree, and every single day, I'll speak for myself, but I know this is true of you too in some circles. Every single day, I'm publicly called a heretic, a blasphemer, a false prophet, a cult leader, a violator of Scripture. Every day, publicly, by more than one person, for any number of things. Wow. Now, to be fair, the vast majority of things that I hear are fantastic, and when we do a post on Facebook, 95% of the things are wonderful. But here's the most important point. I'm told, and I'm just saying this as a fact. I have no meaning behind it, but I'm told every day that I'm the greatest person in their life, and that I've changed their life and then brought them closer to God. And thank you for being such a beautiful person, every day. And I'm told I'm a heretic and a blasphemer, and my show sucks and needs to be removed from the face of the earth every day. Wow. Neither one of those things can motivate me.
Yeah, right.
I cannot ever get to a place where I am writing hoping to get the first thing, the response of this is the greatest thing ever, or hoping to avoid the second thing, which is you're the worst ever and you're sending people to hell. I have to write solely that my 5 loaves and 2 fish, when I present them to God, that he deems them acceptable. And everything after that is really none of my business and out of my control.
So good.
And I have to live that out. I have to. And it sounds easy, but if you can get to that place, if you can truly get to the place where you get that superpower of not caring about a social media comment, positive or negative. Now, to be clear, I, of course, am moved when I hear about impact, when someone says my child loves the Bible more, or my 81-year-old Alzheimer's mom wakes up when your show comes on and her brain is in all of those kinds of things.
Gosh.
Like that, of course, still wrecks me and still moves me. And of course, it doesn't have an ego effect. It has a humbling effect of like, wow, I'm not that good. So only God, I mean, I'm doing my part. I've worked hard, you know, I've earned my seat at the table, but I'm not that good. Like that's a God thing. So I'm willing to do that. But my point is, if you get to the point where you genuinely don't care about the exaggerated praise or the exaggerated hate, it becomes a superpower, and you really it becomes possible to develop habits of surrender, what my wife calls the manna program. You hear my wife mentioned a lot because she's the spiritually intuitive one in the relationship. But where, you know, every day the Israelites came out with their hands outstretched for their daily manna, and God even said, if you store this up, it'll rot, because I want you daily dependent. I mean, he didn't say these words, I want you daily dependent on me, but that was the purpose behind it, was I want you to each day come out needing the manna. Yes. And be concerned when you get really comfortable and you've got storehouses filled with manna, and everything's going smoothly, and you're getting praise and you're starting to get comfortable.
Wow, that's really good. The manna effect. I love that.
Yeah, because either God will leave you alone because he's like, I don't know if I can do much with this person. That's the worst thing. Or he'll insert himself and bring something to you that knocks you off your pedestal. And so, yeah, I mean, that's a really long.
No, it's good. It's the reason why we all have to buy twice as much Chick-fil-A on Saturdays. You got to make it to Monday somehow. It's the only way.
If you learn nothing else from this conversation.
Yeah, that's right. Gosh, but you said a lot of great things.
Yeah, the spiritual leader, Levi Lusko, has just brought the thunder.
You had a second Chick-fil-A sandwich on Saturday, stick it in the refrigerator, and when you're hungry on Sunday, you don't have to go get mad and sing Kanye West. You just got to just have your, man, you're so grounded. And I think what I've learned too is that same thing that you're talking about that you realize other people do to you, because people will flip from one to the other. And then one week it's Hosanna and the next week it's crucify him. I found out this year it's possible to do that to yourself. And to feel only good about yourself when you're contributing, and then to have self-loathing kick in a moment of low production or low creativity, inspiration. And so I think it's having that same balanced perspective that with other people, and then being able to treat yourself with that same kind of cold, not cold, but dispassionate kind of, I'm always a child of God, regardless of whether I feel like I'm really amazing today or really, really That's crushing, good. Not doing so good.
That's helpful.
How did you guys walk through that yourselves as you kind of were walking out of the tragedy of what you experienced? How did you walk through that part of it where you still had to parent, pastor, lead, influence, all of those things that God had called you to do? Did some of that factor into it? Did you feel I'm not as good as I should be, or did you not care about that anymore because of what you'd experienced? You're kind of like, you know what? I'm just that piece of it I'm good with because I'm just so broken right now. I'm willing to be used. How did you guys face that?
I would say probably more the second for me. I know after Lenny went to heaven, we were definitely launched into like, gosh, time is so short and God's given us a task. And so we're going to run with it and we're going to go hard and we're going to do these events across the country and in honor of Lenya and tell as many people about Jesus. So I think initially it was very much run and go and tell people and honor her, and and
which
then
was probably equal parts
anger and
equal parts coping. A coping mechanism was to pour ourselves into kingdom pursuits, and then equally the veil being removed a little bit and seeing how close eternity was and realizing night is coming and no one can work. So I would say it's a little bit of both of that.
Yeah. But I think eventually it kind of caught up with us in the sense that we need to slow down. This pace isn't like realistic. Also, we need to kind of catch up and almost like get our stance and our standing and kind of figure out, okay, take a breath. And I feel like
sustainable pace. We felt like we burned some people out. Not everyone has the same aptitude you have always. And I think knowing the size of plate other people have is key. Wait a minute. This is our interview. Will you stop it? So you will stop interviewing us immediately.
I'm a director, man.
He's a Jedi.
Just crossed your mind.
It's like, how did I get answering a question here? You know what, Dallas, I haven't even asked one question I wrote down to ask you yet. So that just means at some point we'll have to have a part 2, and hopefully Amanda can join because that would be a lot of fun.
We'd love to have
as well. I'm not going to ask you to commit to that on air because you may or may not have hated your time with us today and not want to agree to that. So we'll ask you offline. But the question I did want to ask, and it does connect to our daughter Linya, or just maybe just something I'll say to you and you could speak to it, is when Linya died, one of the things that was so hard, because she was 5, and by the way, watching your daughter film you at the K-Love Fan Awards, I don't know if you recall this, when you got up at the K-Love Fan Awards at the Grand Ole Opry, we were watching it on YouTube, and they show a crowd audience, and the whole time you're walking up to accept your award, your daughter never takes her phone off you. And I don't care what the trolls say, the critics say, the constipated Bible police who are probably still mad about the fact that we're not on King James only, and the Message translation is probably ushering in the great apocalypse, and the Enneagram is a Trojan horse for New Age, whatever. Let me just say this. Your daughter never took her phone off you as you walked all the way. So you know what? You just remember that, screenshot that, because your little girl is proud of you.
Beautiful.
And so just take that for what it's worth. But when Linya went to heaven, one of the harder things for me was I never doubted the truth of heaven. I never doubted for a second that she was okay and that God's still good. We have a big enough grid for the sovereignty of God to know that he even was going to work and all that. So we were never really mad at him or any of that stuff. The biggest thing I was more troubled with at 3 a.m. when I would wake up with cold sweats was who is actually watching her. I know she's in heaven. But I get references from babysitters. We do criminal background checks on Sunday school teachers at our church. And it was just like, is it Esther? Is it Ruth? I just need to know the logistics of who's taking care of her. Heaven's a big place. She's only 5, And when I watched the episode where Jesus is camping out down by the river and he's hanging out with those children, I just felt like that for me was one of the more beautiful things I've seen, just seeing the way, obviously the scripture tells us Jesus had kids just always flocking to him. Mm-hmm. And so I just wanted to thank you for what to me just was, even right then and there, I just gave me, she would be 13 now, but she was 5 then. And just the thought of her being with someone as kind as you portrayed, it meant a lot to me.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with that, but thank you. I think we wanted to, in episode 3 of season 1, early on, get it out of the gate of who I wanted to portray Jesus as. And we don't often see in Jesus projects Jesus by himself. And especially on a show like this where Jesus isn't even the main character, like there's 5 main characters and Jesus is one of them. Mm. It's kind of like West Wing, where the president was the show was about the president and it centered around the president, but President Bartlett in West Wing wasn't the only main character. Yeah. That's kind of how the Chosen is. And so I didn't want every time we were with Jesus to try to have to explain his personality. Mm. And I thought just one episode where he's with children would say
everything,
almost a lot. I'm not going to say almost everything you need to know, but like a good chunk of what we need to know about Jesus that's going to inform the rest of the show.
Exactly.
And then he even says near the end of the episode, he's talking to the children and thanking them for their time together because he was camping and whatnot. And he says, he's basically said, I'm going to be doing a ministry and making meaning with a lot of adults, but I suspect they're not going to have the same understanding that you do, and ask the same questions. And I think that speaks to your experience as well, is that your daughter is, I like to think of this picture of what we portrayed in episode 3, which is your daughter peppering Jesus with questions, peppering, people in heaven with all these curiosities. And like me, we don't know exactly what heaven is like, but
Right.
I do believe that we maintain our personalities for the most part, if not our sin, and that there is that happening, there is that joy that's happening from both ends. And I feel like that's what Jesus meant when he said, you must have the faith of a child. Because I think that's the closest thing we'll get to heaven is that purity that children have.
Yes.
And you mentioned that as one of your
wonder.
4 words. It was authenticity, playful. That's the playful.
What were the 4 words again?
Authentic, intimate, playful, disruptive.
Okay.
Well,
Love
look,
that.
it's been an hour. You got to get going on your way. We do want to welcome you back. I just wanted to just bless you, tell you that what you're doing is important and matters.
Yes.
I heard somewhere that the Jesus film that the Campus Crusade people did at one point was considered the greatest evangelistic tool in the history of humanity, outside of course, the Bible itself. And I think we're going to get to heaven and find the Passion of the Christ was responsible for the salvation of so many people.
Yeah.
I think Mel Gibson and I know they're far from perfect people, just like you're far from a perfect person, and that's not the same as Scripture. But I think God is going to use the chosen as He has, and will continue to usher untold millions of people into the kingdom. And I think that you've made yourself available. So we bless and speak life over you and your family, and protection over your creativity and a sense of inspiration, and perpetually that God gives you the right people, the right voices to encourage you to continue to do all that you're called to do, Dallas, because it's an important thing you're doing, and God's going to use it in profound ways.
Yes.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. Yeah. And I'm so glad to talk to you, and I hope we get to do this again and get to do more together, because one thing I tell pastors a lot is I believe and I hope that the chosen can be another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah.
Because you've got your sermons, you've got your books. And most pastors aren't able to have the platform that you do and do the books that you guys have done, and have the social media presence. But anything that gives you yet another tool because your listeners and your viewers all have different learning styles, all have different personalities, their brains all work differently, and some of them are like, when I open the Bible, it doesn't resonate with me, and we hear that all the time. And then they say, okay, I watched the show, and now when I read the Bible, it does resonate. Now, it's not a replacement, and that's very key. And people aren't saying replacement. But I think that's what a good sermon does, a good book, is it ultimately points you back to Scripture. And I hope that the show continues to do that. And I hope that it continues to allow you in your ministry as well to have more tools. Because ultimately, the point of a show like this, it's 8 episodes a season. When they're done watching it, that's not the end game. I mean, it's not over. They've still got discipleship and worship and all of those things. And I've told worship leaders this, like, after they watch the show, I hand the baton off to you, like, because the point of loving Jesus more is to worship. And I think the same thing is true with what you guys are doing. I want the show to be an entry point into what you're doing.
Well, and
Beautiful.
I would also say to everyone, because we're sold, we're obviously, we've outed ourselves as big fans. I would say to those who haven't watched it, check it out. Watch it on YouTube, watch it on the Chosen app, watch it. It's on iTunes. It's everywhere. I know we've paid for the whole season, first season on iTunes. In addition to Jennie, we've paid it forward. I'm a big believer. If you receive from something, you give to it. It'll mean more to you if you do that. I give to Wikipedia because I wouldn't want a world without Wikipedia. So when they put those annoying banners at the top, I give,
I do. And I actually have to. Yeah.
I believe in that. And you always talk about it. And I would say everyone listening should pay it forward. And you'll have a better experience knowing you participated in it than if you just consumed it.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's an important distinction. So season 1 is available in multiple places: iTunes, Amazon, YouTube, a couple of other streaming platforms, BYU.
Isn't it
and
the
Fox
Peacock?
Nation.
It's on the Peacock one too, right?
Yeah, it's on Peacock. It's on Fox Nation, BYU TV, all this stuff. PureFlix. But the primary source is our own app, and our own app is totally free. It doesn't require a subscription, doesn't require an email address, it doesn't require money or anything. It's completely free, and that's where it is on season 2. So season 2, first couple episodes are on YouTube because we did them as live stream.
That's why it's confusing, because okay.
So you watched probably the first 3 episodes on YouTube.
That's correct.
But now if you want to watch 4 and 5 that are currently out in future episodes in season 2, we do live streams, but they're only up for 24 hours, and then you got to watch them in the app. The Chosen. But the Chosen app is, again, free, and you download it to your phone. And here's the cool thing is, I mean, I don't want to watch a show on my phone, and I'm sure you don't either. It connects directly to your streaming device. Apple TV, Fire Stick, Roku, Chromecast. You can go to someone else's house, and you get on their same Wi-Fi, and you can go directly from your phone to their Roku and watch the show in full HD, perfect quality and everything within 30 seconds. So that's where, like you said, it is totally free. But what we set up is this idea that if you want to pay it forward, like you said, that allows you to keep the show free for other people. It allows us to be able to do more episodes and seasons. But there are people who just can't afford to do that, and especially in other countries, or they just don't feel compelled. And we go, okay, great, enjoy the free show. That's why Levi paid it forward, so that you could enjoy the free show.
Well, and I love how you do that, where you give an option, like you can pay it forward for 1 person to watch it, or 50 people watch it. Like you just kind of give an amount, which is a really cool visual. But I love how you do that. It's amazing.
All right, Dallas, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. God bless.
Thank you so much for listening. And be sure to swing by LeviLusko.com to see what's going on in our world, and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. In the meantime, we would love to connect with you on social media. Jennie and Levi Lusko, out.